You know, I knew when we hit a milestone in Bernie Drops the Needle that I'd want to do something a little bit special. Now, I thought that milestone would probably be at 50 episodes because 50 episodes on YouTube, that's a lot. But no, I've decided it will be episode 52. And the reason for that is because that marks a year since I've been doing these, once a week for the last year. Now, I started this right after the pandemic started. Hopefully now, as I record this, we're about to get out of that mess and move forward. I certainly have enjoyed doing these. They're a lot of fun. Well, they're also a lot of work, but they're a lot of fun. And the comments that I get from people and the subscribers, thank you so much. Please tell all your friends. I'm going to try to keep making them. It's going to get harder now as life begins to get back to normal because life will get in the way. But I'll do my best to keep a rockin'. When you talk about the most popular group in the world, everyone knows their albums. But my collection includes a number of what I refer to as forgotten Beatles records. So let's look at 10 of them. You think you know what they are? You think you've heard them? Let's find out. Let's drop the needle. In the US, there are 19 Beatles albums that are considered canon. Here they are: Meet the Beatles, the Beatles' second album, A Hard Day's Night, Something New, the Beatles' Story, Beatles 65, the early Beatles, Beatles 6, Help, Rubber Soul, Yesterday and Today, Revolver, Hey Jude, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, Magical Mystery Tour, The Beatles, also known as the White Album, Yellow Submarine, Abbey Road, and Let It Be. As any Beatles fan knows, there's a lot more music. So here are 10 forgotten Beatles albums. Every band has to audition, even the Beatles. But contrary to John's famous quote from the rooftop, when the Beatles auditioned, they didn't pass that audition. Here are those infamous songs recorded for Decca Records, who passed on the Beatles saying guitar groups are on the way out. This record contains 15 songs recorded by the early Beatles with Pete Best as their drummer. After years of legal entanglement, the record was finally released in 1979, long after the Beatles had broken up. It's on an obscure label, Circuit Records. Songs include Like Dreamers Do, Chic of Araby, Three Cool Cats, and Besame Mucho. Most of these songs were included in the Beatles anthology series after the Beatles finally got the rights to them. In what seems like a weird, almost unbelievable series of events now, VJ Records, which was a small label, got the rights to early Beatle recordings. This was because Capitol turned down the request by their parent company EMI in London to release the early Beatles music in the US. And Capitol declined to do anything with the Beatles until 1964. So as a result, VJ got out the door first with Beatle Records. But by 1964, Capitol realized, we've made a mistake. And so they decided to really put promotion behind the new single coming out from the Beatles, I Want to Hold Your Hand, and then the subsequent album that Capitol finally released, Meet the Beatles. However, VJ still had the rights to some of the early songs, and so they decided that they could repackage them using the same songs, just putting them in different packages, and they released 3 albums that way. The 3 albums are Songs, Pictures, and Stories of the Fabulous Beatles, The Beatles versus the Four Seasons, and this album, Jolly What? The Beatles and Frank Ifield on Stage. This album is a ripoff. First off, it says on stage. This is not a live record. So why on stage? Pfft, who knows? Secondly, there are only 4 Beatles songs which were on other VJ releases. 8 of the songs are by Frank Ifield, who nobody knew who he was in the US. He's basically kind of an obscure Australian easy listening singer, a crooner. So very cheesy artwork, very cheaply done. And it contains one of the most famous faux pas in any album cover. Clearly stated on the back is the line, "It is with good deal of pride and pleasure that this copulation has been presented." Oops. Pretty sure they meant compilation. But who knows? However, if you do own this record, it's pretty rare. Some stories say they were less than 100 copies ever printed. Here's another quick one from VJ. Hear the Beatles Tell All. This was recorded during their 1964 tour, and it's just interviews, but it's interspersed with live sounds of an audience and girls screaming to make you think it's more of a live recording. And talk about cheesy, the back cover, there are no liner notes, it just hypes the other VJ Beatle releases. Yes, the early days of Beatles records contained some odd selections. Now, it's well known that the UK and English albums weren't exactly the same. Capitol kept cutting songs out of the UK releases for the Capitol US release, which allowed them then to repackage those that had been cut and end up having more albums to sell to the public. This is how the album Yesterday and Today came about, with its infamous butcher cover album. Now, I've always felt that the Beatles were poking fun at Capitol by having a picture where they're cutting up their babies, essentially repackaging the songs. Capitol never saw the humor, nor did the public. So the album was quickly withdrawn and a new cover just pasted over the existing one. It's made the Beatles' butcher cover album one of the most sought after by collectors. But not only were the UK and the US releases different, but also were the Beatle releases in Canada. They often would take them and repackage the songs into a different order. Twist and Shout is the second Beatle album in Canada. It has a unique title, cover art, and song sequences from albums that were released in both the UK and the US. It contains mostly songs from Please Please Me, the UK album. Every Christmas holiday season there was a new Beatles album to buy. But when they started to record Sgt. Pepper's, it was obvious they were not going to be done by Christmas time, so there would be no new product for the holiday season. Brian Epstein could not let that happen, so he commissioned a compilation album. Now, the Beatles wanted nothing to do with it because they thought it was a ripoff. They had nothing to do with the song selection. In fact, they had nothing to do with the artwork. The artwork was commissioned by Brian in the style of the Sgt. Pepper feel. Anyway, the fans lapped it up. It went to number 7. The album is no longer in print. Interestingly enough, the album cover caused quite a controversy, and this is the first album that starts the Paul is dead rumors. Okay, when you look at the front cover, the man reclining, supposedly, according to the rumors, is Paul McCartney. And then you see there's a road with a car going up the road aiming right at Paul's head, because Paul had supposedly died in an automobile accident. And when you flip the cover over and look at the back side, there's a photograph of the Beatles, which was taken in their hotel room in Tokyo. And Paul is kind of obscured by a smoke cloud. So the rumor goes, that's because he's a ghost. Well, all of this, of course, is nonsense. And like I said, the album is now out of print. After the breakup of the Beatles, there were a number of compilation albums put out, and most of them are just repackaging of songs that already exist on other albums. But there are 2 albums with the same name that are much different and are worth having. The first album is called Rarities, and it came out in 1978 in the UK. 2 years later, the album Rarities comes out in the US. And they're pretty different records. The UK album has songs like Across the Universe, lots of B-sides like Thank You Girl, You Know My Name, Look Up the Number, and the German recording of I Want to Hold Your Hand and She Loves You. The US version is quite different. The packaging is totally different. First, it's a gatefold, and when you open it up, there's the famous Butcher cover. And the song selection is different as well. It includes early songs like Love Me Do in mono, Help with different vocals, a slightly different I Am the Walrus, a mono version of The Inner Light, and the Sgt. Pepper Inner Groove. Now, the Sgt. Pepper Inner Groove is interesting. It appeared on the English pressing of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, but not on the US pressing. And what it was a combination of, first off, John Lennon wanted to put something on the record that only dogs could hear. So his idea was, let's put this really high frequency sound right at the inner groove of the record. And then they decided, besides that, they would have some voices and some laughter and stuff. So they recorded them being goofy one night, and it includes Paul saying the same line over and over and people laughing in the background. Now, the fact of the matter is, I was just reading Jeff Emmerich's book, which is great, Here, There, and Everywhere. And the fact of the matter is that most systems that would cut the records and most systems that would play the records back could not reproduce the high frequency sound. So as a result, you just got the voices and the laughter. The high frequency sound was first heard when the records were remastered to CD. Now, it's kind of interesting because what would happen is as the record would finish, you'd hit this inner groove and you'd hear these noises and laughter and so forth. And if you had an automatic turntable, it would lift up after a little bit. But if you had a manual turntable, it would just keep repeating that groove over and over until you got so fed up and couldn't take it anymore that you had to go and lift the needle up yourself. This album hit number 21 in the charts, and both these records are no longer in print, but they exist now on CD as past masters. For years, the Beatles were the biggest rock group in the world who had never released a live album. But that wasn't for lack of trying. At the height of Beatlemania, Capitol decided to record the group over 2 nights in August 1964 at the Hollywood Bowl. After listening to the tapes, Capitol decided that they were unreleasable and unlistenable because of all the screaming. They said the screams sounded like a jet engine roaring and that you couldn't hear the band. As a result, the album sat unreleased for years. At one point, after the album Let It Be came out, which was either saved or salvaged by the producer Phil Spector, depending on your point of view, Capitol decided that they would send the tapes to Phil from the Hollywood Bowl and see if he could make an album out of them. But he never even tried. Finally, in 1977, Capitol came under pressure again when an album came out, not from them, but which was called Live at the Star Club in Hamburg, Germany, 1962, which I'll discuss next. Capitol sent the Hollywood Bowl tapes to George Martin in London, where he painstakingly cleaned them up. And finally, 13 years after the live event, the album was released. In 2016, the album was remixed by Giles Martin and was re-released to coincide with Ron Howard's 8 Days a Week movie. Live at the Star Club, Hamburg, Germany, 1962. Wow. Any Beatle fan who saw that record on a rack would have to buy it. Now, this is the album, as I said, that forced Capitol to finally release the Hollywood Bowl tapes. But if Capitol was concerned about the sound quality at the Hollywood Bowl tapes, they shouldn't have been worried about Live at the Star Club. The sound quality here is horrible. The album was recorded during one of the early Beatle trips to Hamburg. The reason the sound quality is so poor is it was recorded on a home tape recorder with a single microphone. The vocals are muffled, and its only saving grace is it's a historical record and it shows the Beatles with Ringo, but before the madness of Beatlemania. An interesting story is that John Lennon allowed the band to be recorded that night on the condition that the band got free beer for the whole night. But George Harrison had the last word when he said, "This is the crummiest record ever made." Our last Beatles Forgotten record came out in 2013. It's called the Beatles Bootleg Recording. It's an odd compilation album with 59 previously unreleased songs. This album was released with the sole purpose of copyrighting these songs so they could be protected under EU copyright law for an additional 20 years. But the law says that in order for that to happen, the songs have to be formally released. So right as the original copyrights were about to expire, meaning all this music would become public domain, the album was very quickly released and the copyrights were extended. Hard to believe that there are any Beatle albums that are forgotten, but there are. As an example, when was the last time that you listened to the Beatles story? And I haven't even talked about all of the Beatle bootlegs. So I'll keep digging through the collection, see what we can find, and we'll keep rocking. If you liked this episode, hit the like button, and you can also leave me a comment down below, and I'll respond to you. If you subscribe, we'll let you know when future episodes come out. Most of the albums that I talk about can be found at your local vinyl store or on eBay. Individual songs most likely are on Spotify, Apple Music, or Amazon Music, or even some on YouTube.